I don't want no oil a-spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with my co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
And together, Rebecca and I are bringing you an incredible hour of radio called For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about the environment, and we talk about ecology, and we talk about them in terms of you, how they affect your wealth, your health, your happiness, the happiness of your friends and families and pets. And every week, you know, we bring you this hour, and we used to be doing it from the studios at 106.5 FM The Ticket. But since the whole COVID thing came, Rebecca and I have been doing it from our homes, like so many other broadcasters. And when we're doing it at the studio, sometimes I like to get there an hour early or so and go visit the licensed massage therapist that they have on staff and get a nice massage before the show. And it just sort of relaxes you, and it just kind of, as you're laying there on the table and the soft music's playing and they've got the incense burning and you're getting a massage, it really makes you feel like you're getting ready to do something amazing. So in the times of COVID, though, I don't have any of that in here at my home, in my living room. So I dress up, I put my suit on, and this week I have on a special tie. It's a tie with a cat whose copyrighted name I'm not given permission to say on the air, but you'll recognize it if you watch the YouTube version. But this week we've been doing a lot of house cleaning here this past few weeks, and my son found my Eagle Scout tie clip. Yes, I am an Eagle Scout, because they say once you achieve Eagle, you're always an Eagle. You're kind of burdened with that for the rest of your life. And, you know, call me impressionable, but week after week, all through my 12 to 18-year-old life, I would go to a scout meeting and I'd stand up there with my hand up and I'd say, I promise to be trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. It sunk in. What can I say? Just that constant repetition in that impressionable time. And I have always tried to be those things. I'm not perfect about it by any means, but I kind of made the decision, okay, yes, I'm promising to be like this. I'm going to try to be like this and see what happens. And I've been, it's been, like I say, it's been burdened because I've passed up a lot of opportunities where all I had to do was not be trustworthy or loyal or honest. And I could have actually made a lot more money in my life, but in my 58 years here, but you make your choices. That's what life is all about. And unfortunately, the Boy Scouts of America are going through a tough time right now. They're going bankrupt, actually, because there's been so many allegations, so many proven cases of abuse in the Boy Scouts of America organization. And that just brought to mind the idea of the few bad apples. And it's being used all the time now. People are saying, oh, there's just a few bad apples, but they're forgetting the whole statement. The whole saying was
the whole bunch.
A few bad apples spoil the whole bunch. And the whole point of that old saying is you've got to get rid of the bad apples. You have to take them out, or they will spoil the whole bunch. And that systemically is not happening on a lot of levels in a lot of organizations in the United States right now. That idea that, you don't tolerate the bad behavior. You have to stamp it out whenever possible. When I was a scoutmaster, as my younger son was growing up, the Boy Scouts of America had this training program where you always had to have 2 deep leadership. In other words, you never had a leader alone with any of the scouts. And that was a rule they put in, and as trying to respond to all these problems. And we tried to follow that rule, but we had this one guy who just felt like it didn't apply to him, and I'd turn around and he'd be off somewhere. I had no idea where, and I kicked him out of the troop. I didn't wait for something terrible to happen. I was just like, you're not following the rules, you're out. And
there you go.
This one bad apple thing, few bad apple things, I mean, the Republican Party has a few bad apples, and they are at the top, and they have managed to rotten the whole barrel, because when you have the leaders, when the top apples are the rotten ones, then the whole barrel decomposes very quickly, And
now we're into, who was the name of that presidential candidate who failed dramatically, who said the fish rots from the head? Some Greek guy.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't remember that one.
I think it's more a case of that.
Yeah. And I have a story about something Trump's doing that we'll have in the second half that just demonstrates this so clearly. But those of us in the environmental community watching the Trump administration and the Republican Party over these past 3 years, in terms of protecting the environment, in terms of protecting the public, the country is in a state of collapse right now. And I can't, like I say, I have a story in the second half that demonstrates this incredibly clearly. And but we also have a good show. The rest of the show is very nice. We have Sandy Bihn will be our guest, calling in about 8:15, just a few minutes. Sandy is with Waterkeepers for Lake Erie, and Waterkeepers is an organization that's been fighting to protect the lake for many years, and she's got some interesting things to say, because we have to remember that the backdrop for all these political things that are happening is still the environment. The ecology is still a base problem that affects everybody, and it affects people more who are in poorer conditions. Lois Gibbs came on and told us that. And so all these issues of economic class, of race, of all these things tie back in eventually to the environmental issues, because literally all these issues are connected. And it's all part of a big picture. And one thing that that we ecologists have is, or try to have, is a concept, a grasp of the big picture. That's the whole thing about ecology, is you try to understand the entire system. You put everything back together. You look at the chemistry, you look at the meteorology, you look at the biology, you look at the genetics, and ecology, the study of ecology, is trying to put all those things back together into a coherent whole. And we know that we also have to include, as humans, sociology and economics. Those affect ecology also. So all those things have to be woven together to get us closer to reality. And that's what we're trying to do here on For a Green Future every week for about an hour. We try to figure out what reality really is and bring us all a little bit closer and more in line with that, instead of the fantasies that we'd like the world to be. And if you want to help us bring things closer to reality, please give us a call, 866-240-1065, anytime during the next hour. This is the best show in Ohio, but it does get better every time you call. And so if I say anything, or if Becca says anything that you either agree with or disagree with. If we say something that rubs you the wrong way, that you're listening and you're like, oh no, Joe, I just don't buy that, give us a call, 866-240-1065. Go ahead.
Or something you're not sure about and you want to ask more questions.
Yes, those
lateral
we
move.
love.
Yeah.
Those are our favorite kind of questions. So she will be. Let's see. Russell Sandy says she's trying to call and not getting an answer. We'll see if she gets through in a few minutes. But I just wanted to say that one thing about if you were listening last week, you knew that I was going to go out to a protest, one of these protests. They had one in Bowling Green, and it was very calm and very peaceful. The speakers were very emotional and very moving. I heard some things that really touched me in those speeches, but we were packed together. I mean, there was no way to maintain social distance. Almost everybody had masks on, which is good. I knew we were all getting exposed to COVID, and some of us, I know, were going to catch it. And I woke up this morning, 1 week exposure later, and I have a sore throat, so that's why my voice is a little gravelly. Hopefully that's all it'll be. It'll clear up in a few days, but I wanted to say there was a difference between the protesters of a month ago who didn't wear masks, who were at the state capitals all over the country claiming COVID was a hoax, and essentially people who didn't believe they were going to get sick going and protesting and violating social distance. And these protests of today where people know they're getting exposed, they're all wearing masks, they understand the risk they're taking, and they're doing it anyway, which is a measure of just how deep the emotions are here. It's one thing if you don't believe something's going to hurt you, to expose yourself to it. It's another thing to expose yourself to potential danger knowing that it may hurt you. I just think that's a sort of a measure of courage there. So
that's not the only thing that can hurt you at a rally these days, too. There's also the police.
Yeah, there is police, and that has gotten worse. Although it's a mixed bag. Some cities and some police departments are handling it well. A lot of them, especially most of the largest ones, are handling it terribly and causing injuries and even deaths. We had a woman die in Columbus this past week because she was exposed to tear gas, and it triggered her asthma. And it's really just a terrible situation. We are just about at 8:15, and Sandy is trying to get through here. And we will hopefully have her on the line in a moment. In the meantime, Becca, you have done a little bit of research, you were saying, about mushrooms of all things.
I went to do a little research on mushrooms for the month of Father's Day because that was like a special thing that my father and grandfather on that side shared. Grandpa Wood was a part-time stone hunting guide, and Dad always admired about him that he knew the name of everything in the woods in Montcalm County. So I looked it up. Michigan is apparently a great place for mushrooming, especially northern Michigan in the fall. And springtime is morel season throughout Michigan. You can find, not limited necessarily to porcini, santarelle, chicken of the woods, lion's mane, and lobster mushrooms and morels. Morel picking season in the spring. Unfortunately, you've missed that this year, but there's always planning for next year. It coincides with the trout season opening, so that's nice. Best place for morels apparently are very good areas, the Cadillac area in northwestern Michigan. Apparently, they pop up in different areas from year to year, but you can find them in fields, forests, roadsides, even the wood mulch from landscaping. But the best areas would be old orchards and areas that have been either logged or burned. Also, next year, remember, which is about the time we can count on being able to do any traveling, there is an annual mushroom festival in Bihn City from May 14th through 17th. See,
that sounds like a lot of fun, but is it happening this year? Or no, it might not. It probably didn't happen this year.
It was canceled this year, but yeah, you gotta hope the threat is going to be less next year. Really hoping.
And there's a hope for a lot of things next year. I mean, one way or another, I think we're going to get through the worst of this COVID thing this year. I think either it's going to run through the population or it's going to die out, but I think next year will be better.
Next year in Jerusalem, as they say, or Bihn, Michigan, as the case may be.
Morels are, I'm always leery about picking mushrooms because there's so many that look okay, that look like the ones you can eat, but you can't eat them.
See, that's why you need the festival. You need the festival, Joe, because the first year you can just follow the experienced mushroom pickers around. So that way you will not get any false morels. Yeah,
that's cool. Although morels are pretty distinctive. I mean, even the false morel doesn't look terribly close to the actual morel. And the one mushroom I always am comfortable eating is the puffballs and the giant puffballs. Although there is a false puffball. Be careful, but enjoy them. I mean, they're fantastic. They're delicious. I think there's few things as good as like wild mushrooms. How did your family prepare them?
I don't really know. For all I know, Dad, they might have just eaten them raw, potentially out of the field. I don't even know if they brought them home to Grandma Vera. It was 12 kids. There was every man for himself in that family, I'm telling you.
12 kids. Wow, no wonder they learned to forage.
Yep.
All right. Well, when we find the giant puffballs, the way we prepare them is we fry them in butter. And they are just fantastic. And speaking of fantastic, we have finally overcome our technical difficulties.
Yay.
And our guest is on the line.
I am here.
Hooray. Thanks for joining us on For a Green Future.
Sure. And actually, I hunted mushrooms with my uncle when I was young.
Cool.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How did you prepare them? Once you found them?
I don't remember what my mom did, but today, I mean, we love mushrooms, but we don't get the wild ones. We don't go out and find them anymore, but we've gotten them at the market sometimes from some vendors who have found them, so that's fun. But usually the way you did with butter and whatever, a little bit of onions, sauteed onions, and it's a favorite of our family. Actually, when I have dinners here, mushrooms are the one thing that everybody always looks forward to, so we always have them.
What food everybody agrees on. That's great. And finding the mushrooms, or like when I was a Boy Scout and learning to find the edible wild plants, it's really kind of an eye-opener in that a healthy ecosystem, you learn, can provide you with resources. I mean, we're all trained to go to the supermarket, but if you've ever been out and successfully found mushrooms or gone foraging for a wild dinner, or, for example, gone fishing, you know that a healthy ecosystem has incredible benefits, and that's what you've been fighting for a long time, isn't it, Sandy?
It absolutely is, and it absolutely, a healthy ecosystem is sustaining and provides society with huge benefits. This thought that we can just have pollution and deal with the consequences, and that pollution pays in any way or no one pays. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the head of the organization that we're licensed by the Waterkeepers Alliance, gives great speeches in terms of what a healthy ecosystem does economically. He always says that there's better economics, well, not even better, but great economics with a healthy ecosystem, simply because the polluter right now is not paying. That's the problem. And so when the polluter doesn't pay, there's no incentive to change it and to get the system to be healthy and self-sustaining. And therein lies not only a national but an international problem.
Right. And so essentially, polluters are literally stealing from the rest of us because they're taking away this enormous economic benefit we could be having if they weren't messing up the ecosystems.
That's right, and the way we pay is through health. Asthma is a huge one in terms of what it's done with the air, and especially inner city communities, low-end communities. I mean, we all pay. It's not like we get out of it. but the people that are paying are not the people that are causing the problem. And, years ago when we did the Clean Water Act, I love this, example and a couple others where, when that was established, the polluters, the people who were discharging into our rivers and streams, toxics and all kinds of stuff that we're still cleaning up today, all of a sudden when the law came across, they stopped discharging the volumes that they were discharging at one time and through their pipes. And they internalized those costs. And of course we have a thriving economy pretty much, well, usually, except for the virus today. So, that works, and that whole system works in terms of what happens. And then, drilling down in the Clean Water Act and what happened with Lake Erie and the waters here is that people recognized for about 10 years that one of the big contributors to the greening of the water is part of it. Now, the one I just talked about was the stuff coming out of the pipes and the industry that was causing the problems, that literally when they passed the act, they just started changing their practices and no longer discharged, the heavy volumes of heavy metals and other stuff that they were putting into the waters. But
right.
The other piece of it was
the Clean Water Act actually worked. I think that's an important thing, is that this law, we passed a law and it worked. and everybody has benefited from it.
Yeah, we all have, absolutely. And it happened pretty quickly with industry. The industry didn't balk and say we can't afford it. I think they knew that what they were doing was wrong and problematic, and society wasn't going to accept it anymore. And so then part of that people don't quite identify the Clean Water Act with is that there was a movement across this country, especially on the East Coast, started in Akron, Ohio. And the local government passed a resolution saying that you can no longer put put the phosphorus in laundry detergent. That's what's causing our waters to become green. That's what's causing the algae problem. And you need to take phosphorus out of laundry detergent. Little by little, local governments passed resolutions. States then passed bans. 26 or 28 states passed a phosphorus ban on laundry detergent. And all of a sudden we have a huge recovering Lake Erie. So we get two whammies in Lake Erie because it's shallow and quick and responds quickly to these things. It's like the canary in the coal mine for the Great Lakes and many surface waters worldwide. And so all of a sudden the lake comes back, right? In the 80s we have a blue lake, a wonderful lake. And all of a sudden today we're back on the greening side, not on the toxic side. So the toxics are still not being discharged, which is a really good thing. We can always argue about the levels, and there's many emerging contaminants that we're not dealing with that are going into our waters. But skipping all that, the greening of Lake Erie right now also has a route that is identifiable and that we can address that can have a huge change in reducing the amount of phosphorus going into Lake Erie. And that's from the factory farms, confined animal feeding operations, and the manure that they produce. So in the late 90s, I guess it was, that we had this huge change in the U.S. in terms of how we raise our meat and dairy. And what we did was we simply decided that they had to come closer to market, so we had to confine them and put them in these huge facilities. But the real consequences to water are in the manure those animals produce and what we're doing with it. And we changed from pasturing the manure from the animals in widespread operations throughout the U.S. to confining them, and then for cow and pig manure, we had to liquefy it to apply it to the fields. And somehow meat and dairy very cleverly did not get those operations classified as industrial operations, which is what they are. And so the manure they produce is still treated as though they were a farm operation, a traditional old farm operation, and that's just not true today. So while wastewater plants...
I'm hearing that these confined animal feeding operations, or CAFOs is the short term for them, where they bundle all these cows and pigs into these tiny little buildings. Well, not tiny, they're huge buildings, but they're packed in there, side to side. And I heard that one of those can produce as much sewage, and let's call it what it is. It's sewage. It's not as a small city. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. There's a manure CAFO operation, dairy operation in the Lake Erie watershed that has 4,500 cows. That's about the equivalent of 90,000 people, and all of it's being applied to the land. And that happens, we've got just a new permit with 3,000 pigs, and that can be as much as, depending on which manure factory you use or whatever, can be as many as 9,000 or even 30,000 people. So we keep multiplying these things, and we're putting this manure on our fields. At the meantime, in the cities, we're reducing our sewer overage flows with these massive, expensive projects, right? I mean, and the voters have supported it, and people support not putting sewage overflows in our water, but at the same time, we're adding all these animals and land applying all this manure. It does not make sense.
Yeah, it's as if they're thinking somehow that manure, the phosphorus in that manure, isn't going to hurt things because it's coming from an animal, as opposed to our phosphorus coming out of our sewage. But literally, it's the same element; it's the same pollutant, and
it is.
Laws
it's the same source that we had before, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s that we carefully took out, and then wastewater plants also reduced the amount of phosphorus. But at first, wastewater plants couldn't treat it simply because there was too much phosphorus coming from laundry detergent. Today, that same situation applies to manure, and if we treat the manure at the source, similar to what we treat human waste as, and I know there's a lot of animal rights people, and I totally respect that, and I'm not a fan of factory operations, so I don't want to suggest that. But right now we have a water crisis in these algal blooms, and, if these people have to raise these things and they're going to continue to operate, that manure has to be treated. It can't just all be land applied. And in Ohio, we're doing a really crazy thing. So what we're doing is we're saying in H2O Ohio, Governor DeWine's program, he's basically saying that we're paying $65 an acre to haul liquid manure, that's cow and pig manure, liquid, away from the facility to put it on land with 50 parts per million of phosphorus where it's more needed. But we're permitting new facilities with 150 parts per million. So this whole mess, if you will, is just magnifying, and we are now paying the farmer to haul it further away when the real response should be you have to treat it at the source and get the phosphorus out and treat the manure where you can reuse it, or else haul it a long way where it actually does replace commercial fertilizer instead of piling it up so much in new rules.
So let's break that down just a little bit more, so that DeWine, has made a big thing about being pro Lake Erie, and he set aside all this money, which is supposed to reduce the amount of pollution going into the lake, and instead he's actually paying farmers to increase the amount of pollution going into the lake. He's using the money that was supposed to help solve the problem. It's actually making the problem worse.
No,
DeWine.
No, that's not accurate. Okay, let's get
so what
accurate. How would you? Go ahead.
So he's paying the farmer the manure to be taken further away where the land actually needs the phosphorus. But at the same time,
further away from the farm, or further away from the tributaries to the rivers?
No, the barn.
Okay, just
further away from the barn where the
land
has, where they need more phosphorus. Okay, so that's not bad. That's not bad.
Okay.
But at the same time, he's permitting new facilities that are allowed to have 150 parts. So we're paying to take it away while we're permitting to put it on, where we're going to have to pay again to take it away, right? I mean, it doesn't jive in terms of what's happening in the state of Ohio. It just doesn't make sense. Do you understand, or have I not said it well?
So is that kind of a lateral move then, or a clear-cut setback more?
The thing about the funding for Lake Erie and the ag community that's really disturbing, has always been disturbing, is there's been billions of dollars given for what they call best management practices. And best management practices are not bad, so I don't want to say anything about that. But the problem is, when we do these projects, albeit, establishing a wetlands or whatever, we never measure how much phosphorus was going to the lake after a heavy rain before the project and what is happening after a project. So we don't even have a metric to determine which of these are going to work. And for H2O Ohio or any programs we've seen, even the researchers who kind of shy away from doing much with manure acknowledge that, what we're doing with these best management practices, all this money we're paying, is not going to get the 40% reduction we need. You have to do source reduction. What we did before was we reduced the phosphorus from the laundry detergent that was going into the wastewater plants at the source, or anywhere else, right? Anybody that was using laundry detergent. We have to reduce the manure phosphorus at the source, and the way to do that is to treat the manure at the source.
Okay, so like setting up composting, for example, right there at the farm, so that the phosphorus gets trapped in a compost that can then be spread without just running off into the lake, the way just putting raw manure on a farm field that will run off and pollute the lake. So essentially what this has become is a not a bailout, but it actually is incentivizing the CAFOs. It's actually a little bit of price support for this kind of operation. Would that be an accurate statement?
Yeah. Yes, and not only through the H2O Ohio program, but the USDA, the farm subsidies for CAFOs are huge. I'm seeing, and it's not, thank heavens, in the Lake Erie watershed, but we're dumping milk, but there just came a permit to add, 300 more cows someplace. I'm like, why? If we can't sell, I don't get it anymore. The market is strange, and then, there is this sidebar of all this that doesn't relate directly to the phosphorus in Lake Erie, but, there was the swine flu in China that killed so many, and there's a lot of researchers and scientists that suggest that this is a source of, could be, is inevitable that there will be another source of a pandemic from these kinds of operations, which is really scary. But I don't want to really focus on that because that, there's nothing I can say today that, except for the research. Right, but these things are going to be here, hopefully the animals won't die. I mean, they're having to euthanize these because of the problems in the processing plants with the virus, which is really sad. And there's
and I've heard that mass use and euthanizing they're doing is often done using really terrible, inhumane methods. But But I think that what we want to focus on here is that our tax dollars that are supposed to be protecting the lake are actually going to subsidize operations that are hurting the lake. It sounds like both our federal and our state tax dollars.
Right.
Right.
So because there's no metric. I just want to add one major fact, one statistic that's really puts an understanding on this. So I think we all support the farmers, and we all want to see family farmers survive and thrive. But what has happened with meat and dairy is that the number of farmers raising animals for production has reduced, according to US EPA, a 2013 report, by 80%. So, we're getting a lot bigger farms and a lot fewer farmers raising, and that's a problem in and of itself. And then secondly, because the U.S. has mastered this so well, we're exporting more and more. So the number of animals in the last 20 years or so has doubled. So we're raising more animals, producing more manure, bringing them closer to markets, fewer farmers raising them. And, this is big ag. This is not, the small farmer, the family farmer that we all treasure. And, for the U.S. to thrive, many of us believe that it's the family farmer at the base of it that we have to keep and sustain. And this practice just doesn't do that at all.
Right. I think that 100 years ago, the social fabric of the country was a lot different, and farmers were actually a progressive force. I mean, they had the Grange, which was, politically pretty liberal for the time. But now, as you're saying, the family farms have all been driven out of business. They like to point
at just the for the meat and dairy. We have to be careful because I'm just talking about meat and dairy. Actually, the row croppers, the people that use the commercial fertilizer or whatever, have reduced the amount of fertilizer in the Western Lake Erie Basin by about 40%.
Oh, that's good.
They have been good stewards, and they're amazing people to work with. And, they have, because it's a win-win. If they reduce the amount of phosphorus they use and don't need it, less goes into the lake. So they pay less and we get less. That's a win-win for both of us. And it's worked. So the 4Rs and all the programs that we hear and the BMPs in that regard are working very well for the row cropper. And those farmers are not being reduced in numbers. They are going down, but not as rapidly as the meat and dairy ones. So it's meat and dairy farmers that have been hurt the most. The row croppers, and they're the ones that have really responded to the lake the best way, and we thank them for that.
Well, that's great to hear. Yeah, it's good to get the positive out there. That's one of our big things on For a Green Future too, is that we like to focus on the successes and not just be all doom and gloom. So I'm very happy to hear that, Sandy. So your organization, could you tell us a little bit more about it, and if people want more information about what you folks are doing and maybe how they could help?
Sure. So we're Lake Erie Waterkeeper. We're a member of the International Waterkeeper Alliance. There's about 300 of us. It's international, so not only in the U.S., but nationwide. We've been around since about 2004. We're licensed by Waterkeeper Alliance, and our focus is the Lake Erie watershed. So it's all the tributaries and stuff coming into Lake Erie. There is a waterkeeper up in Detroit, so he takes care of that part. There is a waterkeeper in Niagara, so she takes care of that part. So we have a website, and if you go to lakeeriewaterkeeper.org, you can kind of see what we're up to. We'd appreciate, your support and becoming a member, but once in a while we have volunteer opportunities. We don't focus a whole lot on the cleanups and the whatever. Our mainly the volunteer opportunities are when we're able to actually go to places and do education and outreach through tabling and that kind of stuff. We also do a lot of advocacy with elected officials and things on policies and programs.
So I know you guys have been doing great work for a long time, and I know that you are a fount of information about Lake Erie. So each waterkeeper's organization or waterkeeper is focused on like a specific body of water. Is that how you folks are organized?
We're organized by watershed. So you're licensed for your watershed. Yep. So the Detroit River Keeper is the Detroit watershed, and Niagara is the Niagara watershed. The Great Lakes don't necessarily, it's not understood, but many times in the Great Lakes, because the lakes are so big and so whatever, they don't really have a voice for the lake itself. And, as we know in Lake Erie, the tributaries are as much a part of that as, because what happens to the lake comes from the tributaries. Strangely, the tributaries only contribute a small amount of water into Lake Erie, but they're the problem, right? They're the main problem into the lake. So, yeah, that's how it's organized. It's organized by watershed. You get licensed by your watershed. All
right. Well, thanks so much for being on For a Green Future, and hopefully we can have you on some more. And
thanks. As the summer goes, we're going to have a report card coming out in August. University of Maryland helped us with looking at the lake. We're hoping that'll go on. That's what they're doing in Chesapeake to kind of show progress. One of the things we don't have here is accountability. So maybe you'd be interested in that. And I don't know, I'm looking at the satellite imagery, and we had those heavy rains last week, and the lake's looking like it's got a green hue in parts of all the way to the islands. So we'll see. We'll see. We would have rather have a blue lake. And I guess I'll just add a small non-green thing. We're also working on the Toledo Lighthouse, and there's some exciting news coming out on that this coming week. So,
all right.
Stay tuned.
Well, all right. That's
okay.
August. All right. It's a date, Sandy. We'll have you on
okay.
in August. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. It's a beautiful day. Enjoy it. Take care.
Absolutely. That was Sandy Bihn. And as Sandy said, it's going to be a beautiful day. And one way to enjoy it is by taking advantage of one of our sponsors. And that sponsor is the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, they provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead outdoor adventures. The Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy, from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. And there's several ways you can get in touch with them to see what they're doing. One, you could just pick up the phone and give them a call at 419-353-1897. Another is they have a cool app. You just go to the App Store and download WC Parks. And one cool thing about that app is you can upload pictures that you take at the parks, and I've got a couple of pictures in there that you might like. They have a website, wcparks.org, and of course you can check them out on Facebook. So that's the Wood County Park District. And we're very grateful to have them as a sponsor. And we're also very grateful to our patrons. We have a patron page on patreon.com, and we have people that have gone there and they just sign up, and every week or every month a tiny little, barely noticeable little donation comes out of your checkbook automatically and comes to us, and we are really grateful for it. It really helps us keep this program on the air. So just go to patreon.com and you can search for a Green Future. Well, that was a very informative. I was not aware of the difference between the row croppers and the meat and dairy farms in terms of the ecological impact. So I was very grateful that Sandy taught us that. All right. Now, and Rebecca, if you would get back on the line, just let me know when you're back on the line. But now it's time for Eco-News and some ecological stories. And I like to start out, here's some good stories. On this show, we tend to be ahead of the curve. We tend to report on things before they make the national news. I mean, that was true of the Lake Erie Bill of Rights. And last week, we reported that it has now become cheaper to build new wind and solar than it is to continue to operate existing coal plants. And lo and behold, on June 2nd, Reuters had a big story from the International Renewable Energy Agency, cheaper to build new wind and solar than to run old coal plants. And so just showing once again the economics of doing things in a green way, the economics of doing things in an environmentally balanced way, come out in your favor. You will make more money and you will be wealthier, we all will, if we operate in a clean manner. If we shut down the coal plants, shut down the nuke plants, switch to wind and sun, it's always made ecological sense to do this. But now it's also clearer and clearer that it also makes economic sense to do it. And so just thought that was interesting that we basically reported on it, and then it got picked up by a national news organization. Another interesting story, way back in December, Denmark made a commitment to get the country down 70% below 1990 carbon levels by 2030, and to be completely carbon neutral by 2050. And just to follow up on this, they have laid out how to do it and passed a law basically saying this is how we're going to get there step by step. And they've budgeted 133 billion euros to do this, and that actually sounds like a lot of euros, but it turns out to be less than 1% of the GDP of Denmark. And so they will be getting the benefits of reducing the carbon. And Denmark, there's a specific reason that Denmark is doing this. Oh, and by the way, they're part of that process, that step, they're going to have 0% coal energy in just 5 years. All heat and electricity will be coming from renewables in 5 years. They're also going to change their transportation methods, and they're going to change their industrial practices. And Denmark, of course, is in a unique position because they have reclaimed a large section of their country from the ocean. Remember those pictures of Denmark? You picture the picturesque wind turbines windmills that they have there, the big old-fashioned ones with fabric. Well, those pumped seawater out behind dikes, and so a lot of Denmark used to be under the ocean, and so they understand the seriousness of ocean level rise. They understand that you just raise the level a few inches and you wipe out a lot of usable land all over the world. And so they're leading, as they have been for a long time, on these renewable issues. And I'm just happy to see them. Now, unfortunately, while Denmark leads, the U.S. is turning tail and running away. Denmark's leading the world into the battle. The U.S. is turning tail and running away from the battle, throwing down the guns, chickened out, et cetera, et cetera. Trump, this is the story I was talking about earlier on. As you know, if you listen to this story, the federal EPA has already suspended the regulations governing pollution during the COVID crisis, using the COVID crisis as an excuse. Trump has now said that he's extending that to suspend all environmental reviews of new projects. In other words, if you want a factory or create a new dam or dike or anything, he's saying now you don't even have to have environmental review because of COVID. And so not just screwing the present by eliminating enforcement of environmental laws right now because of COVID, also screwing the future by saying you don't have to do any sort of environmental review if you want to pave over a wetland or tear down a forest in order to build a big polluting factory. Just go for it. And it's incredible because on the one hand, Trump is saying COVID is such an emergency, we have to suspend all the environmental laws. And on the other hand, he's saying, go back to work, go back to the restaurant, COVID's not a big deal, there's no emergency here, just do whatever you want to do. The two-facedness of it, the hypocrisy of it is just mind-boggling. Unfortunately, it's not surprising because it's the same thing we've been seeing literally since the first day Trump got into office. But it's still terrible. And we as Americans should not stand by and let our country literally be destroyed because Trump has decided he's not only going to not enforce current laws, he's going to not enforce past laws, and he's going to exempt future projects from environmental review. So that's a terrible thing. And the EPA is taking comments on it right now for the next couple days. They're rushing this one through like they're rushing everything through. But it's something that literally should not and must not happen. So that is the news that I wanted to talk about today. And I do have, on a brighter note, it's time for our letter from the future. As you know, if you're a regular listener, every week I get a letter from my great-great-granddaughter Marie I, who's living in the year 2300. And here's this week's letter. Dear GGG, I'm gradually getting stronger, going outside almost every day now. Remember, I set the goal of walking the whole length of the Slippery Elm Trail? Well, I'm almost able to walk the 3 blocks to the start of the trail now. Mostly, I sit in the yard reading and watching the garden grow. Putting my tablet down, I'm looking around right now and trying to list what is different from your time. Let's see. One big difference is the biodegradable robots walking around. I could see 4 of them from where I'm sitting in the backyard. They're solar-powered and made mostly of locally available resources. That means maple and cedar sticks and twigs. They do the mundane tasks we need done, like weeding the garden, chasing away rabbits, pulling up invasive species, etc. They're engineered so that when they break down, they literally drag themselves into the bushes and decompose. In much of Asia, they're made from bamboo. Every town has a robot making workshop, and when one breaks down, it tells the house computer and orders a new one, and then that delivers itself. All our technology now is designed to be as unobtrusive as possible. The houses are still here, but houses don't stand out like boxes on a tabletop anymore. We have trees and bushes all around. Studies have shown that people are happiest when they're surrounded by natural settings, and there's no invasive species around, no dandelions, no Queen Anne's lace, but there's many beautiful native plants like coreopsis. There's also a lot more birds. Right now I'm watching a pair of bluebirds catching mosquitoes to feed their chicks. Yes, we have mosquitoes in the future. Occasionally they get so bad we have to stay indoors for a day or two. But nature always gets back in balance quickly, and mosquitoes are a small price to pay for bluebirds. Love, Marie I. So, a nice letter from Marie. For parting news, a very nice little piece of news. There's a place up in Canada called Okanagan Lake, which is an interesting name given this story, and that is that Okanagan Lake this year has had a return of salmon. It's the first time in 50 years that the salmon have run all the way up to Okanagan Lake. Prior to this, there have been dams blocking the way, and so the people of the region got together and the local governments and said, we have to fix this. So they built fish ladders. They built fish ladders with basically it's got a mixture of steps and pools. So the salmon, as they're running upstream, can come up those ladders, and then they can rest in the pools, and once they're rested, then they go on and do the next section. And so this year, 50,000 salmon made it all the way back to Okanagan Lake. And, it's just another example of what can happen when people put their minds to it. Sandy Bihn was talking earlier about the vast improvement to Lake Erie when we passed the Clean Water Act. It fixed the lake. The lake was literally biologically dead. We passed a law, everybody changed their behavior, and then the lake came back to life. It got very healthy and has literally spawned, a $7 billion a year fishing industry around Lake Erie. What we need to do, obviously, with these CAFOs, and what the problem is, it's that few bad apples principle again that we were talking about at the beginning. As Sandy said, most farmers are acting responsibly. The vast majority of farmers are, but it's this narrow subsection, this little group that has decided to get around environmental stewardship, that has decided to take the laws and pervert them and take the subsidies and use them to do the very damage that those subsidies were trying to prevent. And so what we need to do as Ohioans is help organizations like Sandy's and help organizations that are trying to bring us back into balance. And we have to identify those few bad apples. And then the key thing is once they're identified, take them out of the barrel. That's what you must do. It's not enough to just point a finger and say, oh, there's a bad apple and there's a bad apple. Because soon all the apples will be bad. As we said at the beginning, a few bad apples spoils the whole barrel. And so we've got, as Sandy said, we've got these meat and dairy producers that have skirted phosphorus regulations or taken advantage of phosphorus regulations to spread their manure on the fields, and that's what's again hurting Lake Erie so badly. And hurting all of us, because just as if you have a healthy ecosystem, it helps everyone economically, socially, environmentally, physically in terms of their health. If you have a sick lake, it's a drag on the economy, on everybody's social benefits, on the health and wealth of everyone. And so that's why here at For a Green Future, we're coming every week, and we're just incredibly grateful for this opportunity. We really enjoy being with you. I love doing this show. It's one of the highlights of my week. And so please don't hesitate to visit our Patreon page. Don't hesitate to check out past episodes on our YouTube page, or you can listen to our podcast. It's on Podomatic.com. Just search for a Green Future. Share it with your friends. And you can also always give us feedback if you want. Please send us an email at joe@joedemare4agreenfuture.org. DeMare spelled DEMARE, and 4 is FOR, so it's joe@joedemare4agreenfuture.org. And just wanted to say thanks again, and this is Joe DeMare, signing off.
Who think radioactivity is fun? No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun